All right, so today we're going to talk about faceting bowls and trimming them. A faceted bowl is something that has many sides to it in ceramics. Some people will also consider this fluting. Fluting is when you put grooves into this. This is typically done at a very dry leather hard stage, but can also be done freshly on the wheel right after throwing. Today I'm going to be showing examples of how this is done at a dry leather hard stage. First thing that we want to consider when we're making our bowl is to leave the sides extra thick than what we typically would. So I still have enough clay here to support the shoulder. I've left some extra clay here that will go through the carving process. All right. Typical bowls on this are about 2.5 pounds. So I'm going to make something about that size. These are good shapes for little tea bowls and things like that. Remember, in your centering, it's all about strength of your positioning of your body and not strength of your hands. I'm going to open this up as I typically would a normal bowl and pull this over. I like my bowls when I do this to have this kind of oriental tea bowl effect to them, so I kind of have a shallow flat bottom. And then I'm really focusing on leaving this area here as my thick sides. I'll come underneath here and smooth out, kind of thin this out a little extra underneath here. And that's how I get that separation of that bowl shape to where I can still trim this bottom, have some clay there to support, but also know I'm leaving this thickness here for my carving faceting to come up later. The thickness depends on how deep you want your grooves to be. Some tools that you will use for the faceting might be deeper than others, so that will make a difference in how much clay you need to use there. I'm a little less than 1/2 inch, probably around 3/8 of an inch thickness. So this piece there, you can see my thickness here. It's about a little bit thicker than the tip of my pinky. And that will sit over to the side until I get a good leather hard stage. For the purpose of the faceting, what I'm doing today, there's a couple different types of tools that you can use. I like to use these Sureforms. You can get them from your hardware store or from your typical pottery supply store here in St. Louis, Missouri. We use Kruger Pottery. There you go, Ryan. It's one of his tools there. He sells the mud tools, but also any type of cheese slicer, cheese grater will work as well. In the wet form, some people will use a wiggle wire, these are called now. We used to just stretch out springs back in the younger days. Or any of your typical loop tools will also work for this process. This piece, as you can tell here, is I've thrown already. It is set for a full day, and it is ready to go through that carving process. It's at a good dry leather hard stage, and the reasoning for this is that I don't want the clay to gum up too much through this process. I'm going to use my curved one today. Typically when I start this process, I am not doing each section to its fullest degree, meaning I'm leaving a little bit of separation in between my sections here, and kind of almost in the aspect of drawing, getting a rough sketch. What I don't want to happen is get around to the end and only have a little bit of clay left for a section, and then it look uneven. So if I give myself a little bit extra space ahead of time, I can play this out and try to make it as even as possible. Now, I'm not doing my trimming ahead of time because I like the look, the appearance of the cleanness of what it looks like trimmed afterwards. So that makes some difficult trimming process, especially for those of you that are used to using a Griffin grip, which I'll show you here in a few minutes. The Griffin grip will hold these pieces uneven, meaning that they're not a perfect circle anymore. So that being the case, you can have some wobble. So you can see my section left here lines up pretty good. So I'm happy with that. So now that I've kind of reached my way all the way around, I can come in here and finish off the carving of these other sections, make them a little bit wider, come in a little bit closer to that rim. Just trying to stay conscious of that rim. Clearly I don't want to go too thin, but at the same time, you don't want this piece to be overly weighty. And since I'm leaving that large amount of clay, it's something that I'm kind of taking inventory on as I go through this process. If the clay is gumming up too much on your tool, or is it gumming up too much on the piece, then there's nothing wrong with kind of setting it off to the side and letting it dry up for another 15 minutes or so. It really makes a difference, I think, in the way that these look. I just don't like the way the clay can connect sometimes and make these look a little messy. You can see this one is probably just a little bit on the wet side. Since we're in the middle of this already, we're not going to go ahead and stop the videotaping. This makes good clay for any type of slip reclaims, things like that. I really like these grooves that it puts in there. So you can see there, we kind of got our little chaotic mess going on. These are falling off nicely. Make sure that rim is nice and smooth. And then I'm going to go ahead and start the trimming process on this now. I typically am an old-fashioned trimmer. I prefer not to use a Griffin grip. I'll tap this in the center, which for some of you I know is always a constant battle to work with. Tap that into place, that will work. Remember, you can always take your trimming tool or a wooden knife and check that and make sure it's perfectly centered by making that scratch going all the way around. Once that is connected, I always start with my small trimming tools. I like these wire trimming tools by Kemper. I'm going to trim down my sides. And then I'll go into the inside. Remember, for beginners, the process is really about being firm on your tools and not having those being weak-handed. You can really choke up on these like a pencil. Think about a baseball bat. Make sure that you really have a good grip on your tool, because especially with trimming at a little bit of a drier stage, these will pull away from you. Always take your finger and kind of smooth off that bottom here. Make sure that's nice and soft. And then I'll come in here. I really like these tools. The Dolan here, it's got a nice shape. Usually a good sharp edge. I know not one you really buy the really expensive trimming tools. I'm kind of a creature of habit when it comes to that. Once that is done, then you can see here, a good looking faceted bowl, trimmed edge, nice lightness to it. A little cleanup with the green sponge pad will get you set and have you off and running. This is a handy process for students that leave bowls extra thick, but also another decorative process that can be done with bowls, but also can be brought into lidded vessels, taller containers. You can see on this one I did my faceting at a little bit more of a carved angle, or a 45-degree angle. And this one here, pretty much the same as leaving the bowl. I left it a little thicker on the bottom than I did at the top to be able to change that direction and that thickness. All of these are good adaptations to a very basic faceting process. Right. Stay tuned for future videos on lid making and other items. Again, my name is Tony Borchardt. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll be happy to answer them for you.